docs. You want to be financially independent 15 to 20 years into attendinghood? It starts the moment you finish trading with these following 12 steps.
Welcome to the Physician Sense Podcast, a podcast designed specifically for physicians, offering a breakdown of complex financial topics to help you develop your financial IQ, further your financial journey, and improve your well-being. Whether you're a medical student, resident, fellow, or attending physician, you're sure to learn something new that will benefit your journey. And now, your hosts, Chad Chubb and Tyler Olson.
Welcome back to another episode of the Physician Sense Podcast. I am your co-host, Chad Chubb. I am joined by the one, the only, just good to see your face again, Tyler Olson.
Hey there, Chad. Great to see you too, man.
I feel like we say this every time we come back from a little break, but for our listeners and viewers on YouTube, we take a little break. Tyler and I take 2 breaks per year where we get into our own client meetings. In the financial industry, we call them surge. Or if you live in Florida, you don't use the word surge anymore. You call them huddles because hurricanes scare the bejesus out of you. But we're back after a little bit of a break. Lots of fun news that broke. We'll cover that in some upcoming episodes as well. But how's life, my friend? How was summer? I know when we're recording this now, this will come out a little bit later, but how was your summer?
It couldn't be over fast enough because I like the cold. It was good. It was hot, and it kind of felt like summer continued on through September. But as you can see, if you're out watching on YouTube, I finally get to put on my sweaters. So I'm grateful for that. How about you?
Good summer. Our summer goes for about another 4 months. So these episodes will go live in December. So it's probably still like 105 down here, 95% humidity. No, it's actually, we're recording this in late October. We've had some cooler days. There's been some chill in the air in some mornings. So for like Florida, 80. I'll take it. Yeah. The big win for us so far, knock on wood, hopefully this doesn't change, but it's been a very calm hurricane season. So literally like nothing. So knock on wood, I'll take that. But we're back. I love being back, recording with you. Plus, when we have these breaks, I feel like our content ideas builds up. So today, we have content that you, of course you and your tweets are so beautiful. You had a tweet going back to July 27th. And that is going to be the catalyst for our first ever 3-part miniseries. And let me share some stats from this tweet, just so, of course you all know that Tyler is, the physician king on Twitter. So this one had almost, I'm going to say right over 38,000 views. It had the key, you got good content when bookmarks have ratioed your likes. Bookmarks almost up to 500 and then pushing right around 300 likes as well. And it was this, Tyler, if you don't remember, on July 27th, you wrote docs. You want to be financially independent 15 to 20 years into attendinghood? It starts the moment you finish trading with these following 12 steps. Ooh. And today, we're going to cover steps 1 through 4. And then next week, we'll hit 5 through 8. And then the following week, we'll hit 9 through 12. I will read the tweets. Tyler and I will then break those down. I like to say that this is pretty much a beautiful little financial plan in a tweet. And we're going to add some context. So again, you get 2 financial planners. You get 2 different views. Clearly, Tyler gave you some of his ideas in the tweets, but he'll be able to build on it. I'll be able to add to it. But this should be a fantastic mini-series. I expect this one will do pretty well. But one of my favorite notes you put in here, Tyler, was you can build generational wealth in these next 3 years, or wake up at 40 with a boat, 2 BMWs, $1 million mortgage, and 0 freedom.
Yeah. No, that's I've seen both sides.
Throwing haymakers in this one. It's funny too because I feel like this topic comes up quite a bit, and I don't know. I probably said this on past episodes, but I feel like the physicians that reach out to financial advisors already think a little bit differently than money. So, not to say that we don't have these moments occurring, but I don't feel like we have it occurring as much as what maybe is actually happening out there, but they're just not reaching out to financial advisors because maybe they're making some silly decisions. But I feel like the overall persona of non-physicians is like, doctors are rich. They have so much money. So easy for them, when they don't realize how much actually goes into it. So I actually love that first tweet because I feel like while we don't see it that often, we know it's out there. I was kind of labeled as keeping up with the Joneses type mentality. but we'll get into it. But what was the motivation behind this tweet? I should not even call it a tweet. It's just a beautiful thread is what I should call it.
I appreciate your commendation. I love writing about it. One thing too I wanted to point out, because there is so much AI generated content these days on social media. I just realized now, I think one of the reasons that it might have done well is because there was a typo in the initial post. And when there's a typo, then you know that a human wrote it. Because it should have been, you want to be financially independent, not do you want to be financial independent.
They know you're a human.
Yeah, they know, oh, that's Tyler, because I goof up sometimes. But no, I mean, the reason why I wrote it up is because over the course of this past calendar year, I've had a number of physicians in their 50s approach us. People that approach us when they're right out of training or a few years after. And there are some too that are like 10 years out. They've been DIYing and all of a sudden they're like, okay, complexity, let's get a planner. We don't see these issues like that one that I mentioned here about the BMWs and the mortgage and whatever, but very often from that. But from the people that we don't see, kind of like what you were talking about. And I've had the door kind of opened up to that this year to a greater extent, where docs were coming to us with these sort of situations. And they're in a spot where they're having to like work now into their 70s, or they're having to sell their home and move to another area entirely in their 50s. And that is tough. And my heart just was weighing heavily as I looked through these scenarios as people were presenting them to us. Anyway, that was the catalyst, because I think that there's so much good that can be done right out of training to make it a much easier path if you set the pattern, if you set the habits right.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's kind of out of the ordinary, but if you can reach out, clearly there's a little bit of bias here, but if you can reach out to a financial planner, and it doesn't have to be a lifetime engagement, maybe it's just a one-time plan or hourly engagement, but if you can reach out earlier to get that foundation built before you make questionable decisions, it sets you on such a greater path. And also, even if you're not on track, let's say between 35 to 45, a little tweak here or there in a long-term plan projection is a huge difference. And that's where, I kind of always make the joke where, like, if you come to us at 35 and it's not on track, we're changing things by like a little bit. If you come to us at 65 and you're not on track, it's going to be life altering to get you back on track, because we just lost our most powerful tool, right? In all personal finance, the most powerful tool is just time because of compounding interest. So, I couldn't agree more in terms of like when you see someone come in a little bit later down the line and a lot of those big fixed expenses are locked in, like, the home that may have been too large. Not easy to fix that. You're not like, oh yeah, just put the house on the market, sell it, downsize. It's easy. Just do it. Get rid of the cars. Like, you guys like bicycles, just ride to work. You kind of build that in and you have that foundation in there. It's a little bit harder. So with that, I think it's a perfect segue into step one. Step one is don't fall for the I earned it trap. Yes, you did earn it, but upgrading to the $1.2 million house, very precise number in there, Tyler, the G-Wagon, the country club right now is like eating dessert before you've had dinner. Freedom is greater than flexing. We'll build the fun stuff after we build your foundation. Beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much time that doctors spend not allowing themselves to do or buy the things that they want to. And I think the main thing I was thinking about here is that not two things, the training that has been completed, but now also the new responsibility of attendinghood, which is a significant pressure that I know a lot of new attendings, they don't realize how it's going to feel until they're in the midst of it, where they're the final call and that's it. And not only that, they're learning new systems, possibly new colleague dynamics, all that, but the buck stops with them. They are the final call, and they have to not only be confident, but they also need to be efficient. And that is a lot of pressure. And so the mentality of, I earned this. It is like I deserve the house that I wanted. I deserve to be able to go back to the home that I've always wanted now. And they just do it because they're stressed. They've got the money now. They're like, why can't I do it? Why shouldn't I? And so they do it. And they're like, I'm going to buy I'm going to buy the $90,000 car. I'm going to buy the house that's 4x my income and not put too much thought into it, except that they could afford the payment based on their paycheck.
My biggest fear always too is doing this too early. To me, everything comes back to family planning, but my biggest concern is when you have, whether it's a single physician or a dual physician household, is income looks fantastic. And whether it's student loans or not, you have a lot of discretionary income. So you're like, well, I can afford the $90,000 car. I can afford the $1.2 million home. But then all of a sudden you have your first child and your second child and your third child, and depending on where you live, private school is very expensive. Having kids in general is expensive. So that's always our big thing, is just be careful, lock into those big things. If you ever want to have agile and keep your plan agile and be flexible, you want to do it earlier in your career. And you noted, very well, even in the tweet, like you can get the G-Wagon. You can likely get the large home. Like if you build that foundation and you keep it, dare I say, boring at the start, you will have all the flexibility to do that because, again, you're high end. It clearly depends on a lot of dynamics, but for a lot of you, like, you will have those opportunities. And it's a give and take, right? Do you want a $90,000 car, or do you want to take, a $20,000 vacation every year with your family? Like, there's always going to be give and take. We can't fix that part of it. To me, that's actually the most exciting part about financial planning. As I joked before, some of these larger expenses, like a home in particular, that's locked in. You can't get in and out of those. And if you're not familiar with closing costs, buying a home and selling a home is very expensive. We usually say like a break even is 5 years. So if you buy a home just to make up the overall closing costs, you likely need to be in that home for at least 5 years. Again, it depends on some metric, but that's a good kind of like at least line to think about.
I think that what is really important to know is that last part, building your foundation. If you think of it like a house and you think about the stuff that you want about a home, those are never the footings, right? Those are the pretty things. Those are the recreational things. And obviously when you actually build a home, you don't do those things first. You put the footings in, make sure that it's on solid ground. And it doesn't take that much to get there. You just have to do it first. You have to build the foundation, which is not, which is actually leads into step 2. So that's why it's a progressive list. But it's frustrating because it's so simple that it's such a simple thing that can be done. It's just that the education is not consistently out there for physicians to realize this must be done first before the big spending happens. And I hope that you all spread this to your colleagues.
And for those of you that are in any expensive parts of the country, you're probably thinking $1.2 million, it's going to get me like a shack that barely livable. I think about my Southern California clients, but for the bulk of us, that's pretty darn nice home. I chuckle about the G-Wagon. I feel like the G-Wagon is always like that. The G-Wagon and like the Porsche, what is it? The 911, the Carrera, the little one. I feel like those are always the ones where like, I've made it. And they get the license plate that says like doctor. Like
I have a physician couple client who has that exact pairing of cars. But their income is also close to like $2 million. So, and this is the problem, because on the outside, it just looks like, oh, doctor, this type of car, doctor, this type of house. And even like Southern California, New York City people, like 1.2 million does not apply to you in terms of the number.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you don't have to plan. That doesn't mean that you are not responsible for looking at your numbers, which we'll talk about in step 2. You still have to do that. Your window of opportunity and your choices likely will be more limited, but that's likely a quality of life priority decision that you've made. You want to live in that space for some reason, so you will be willing to sacrifice the size of the home and other expenses because homes are more expensive. So the principle stands. So any of you that look at the $1.2 million house and you're like, oh, that doesn't apply to my area. We're not talking about $1.2 million. We're talking about planning and understanding how to build your foundation around your circumstances.
And again, the deeper thing I always think about on this topic is always like, what do you value? Like, I don't value nice cars. To me, we're a Jeep family. Like, it's a safe car. It gets me from point A to point B. Where other clients, like, they really value a nice car and they're willing to give up something else for a little bit higher car budget. Some people, same thing with the home. Like, hey, listen, we don't travel at all. We don't like nice cars, but we know this beautiful home in the kitchen and living room there is where we're going to make all of our family memories. That pool in the backyard, I'm not leaving in the summer because this is what we value. We want to create the memories here. So to me, I think that's actually the hardest part about financial planning is trying to dig deep enough to say, like, what matters most to you? Don't worry about what the textbook says. Don't worry about what Physician Sense podcast said. Like, you need to know what's most valuable to your family. Of course, it still needs to fit number wise. But again, if you really value the beautiful home because that's where all the memories are going to be made, but you don't really care much about the travel part or the nice cars or kind of mix any of those around, there's always a conversation to be had there, which again, a little biased here, why bringing in a third party, a financial planner, maybe you have a really cool accountant, I don't know, to kind of talk through those things can go a long way. So I love that one. So step one, very good there. As you said, it's a building list. So let's go to step two. Step two, know your number. Before you buy anything, track your cash flow for 3 months. Not just a rough guess, actual numbers. You gave a shout out to Monarch Money, which that we love Monarch. Tiller's a good one. YNAB's a good one. We do use Monarch too, so I love that one. Or go old school on them. Go on a spreadsheet. If we want to go really old school on them, go pen and paper. But you're looking for finding out the fixed expenses, discretionary burn, savings rate. Most stocks think they're saving. They're not. As I always like to say for this topic, numbers don't lie.
And no one likes to do this. And I can see it on most people's faces during meetings when we're like, we're going to schedule a cash flow meeting. And they're like, oh, okay.
At least you call it cash flow, not budgeting. Because I feel like budgeting is one people are just like, you see like the actual complexion, like their skin color changes, like cold sweats start going down.
Yeah.
Cash flow is a nicer way to describe it.
Mm-hmm. Don't worry. Dave Ramsey is not in the room. He can't hurt you. Everything's going to be okay. But it's so important to know what your cash flow is. And I think the real challenge here is for anyone who this tends to be, in my experience, with households where their income is over 400,000. If it's I don't know why this is the number that sticks in my head, but in my experience, if your income is less than 400,000 household income, there tends to be a little bit more awareness on average and willingness to examine cash flow, because obviously even like a $200,000 household income is very good. 300 is obviously very good. But with costs, depending on where you live, you're going to at least feel it. You can't just spend whatever you want to. But anyone who is above 400, 5, 6, 7, 800,000, there is a resistance to look because they're like, I don't need to. And maybe they don't, but only if they've done step 3, which is about the savings rate. We'll get to that soon. But the problem that I see is they're like, well, I have maxed out my 403B, so I'm good, or I've maxed out my 403B and my 457B. And there is so much opportunity in the remaining cash flow that is just nebulous. They don't know what's going on. And I think that it's worth it. I think that it helps from a cultivating humility standpoint and appreciating where our money is going, that we should do this at each stage of our income increase, because otherwise we become very entitled in like being able to buy the things that we get used to buying. Mm-hmm. And we may not be standing on solid footing. What if we get ourselves in a place where we're spending on things and we didn't do the analysis? We get accustomed to it. They become stress purchases, whether it's going out to eat, vacations. I can't de-stress unless I'm on a beach somewhere, and I have to do it every couple of months. And my kids must go to private school, but I've got the income, so it's probably fine. I have seen households that are in like the north of $500,000 income where they are in trouble. Mm. So this is really important. So even if you think that you can do the reverse budgeting thing, which maybe some of you have heard about that, where you address the savings rate and you save for retirement, and then everything else you think is up for grabs. I personally don't think that that's all that there is to it, because there's also short-term and mid-term savings goals that need to be addressed. And if you haven't addressed those, then you'll only be saving for retirement. And then there's this gap between like age 43 and 60 where you may be lacking. And if you had done some, knowing your number, you can address it and spend intentionally. So that's why I wrote this.
I don't know if I think it might have been on a Kitchens podcast, but one of the guests described like that level of income as like dangerously high income, where it's high enough that you don't budget, but not high enough that you can't care. And I was like, man, that is a really good way to describe it, because I feel like so many, like how many physicians fall in that like $300,000 to like $600,000 range, and it's exactly that. They're not nitpicking their budget. They can go out to eat, they can do fun vacations, and they don't have to think twice about it because the cash flow is there. Now, if, like you said, step 3, I'd even say step 4 that we're going to get to as well. If you've covered that, maybe you can have that type of discretionary spend. It doesn't affect anything. But if you can build these, the sooner you can build in the idea of budgeting or cash flow tracking, the better. And this doesn't, I think some get concerned because they're like, I can't do another like monthly to-do thing. And, I think if you can look at this quarterly, if you can look at it semi-annual, we call them money dates with your spouse, significant other. I'm just like kind of sitting down, and maybe it's not a Monarch. Maybe you do everything on your Amex card. You can go on there. There's great reporting now on credit cards where you can see like, wow, we spent a ton of money at Amazon and Target. That was more than we thought. Or wow, we thought our grocery budget was $500 a month, but clearly we went to Whole Foods and Trader Joe's for almost double that. I sometimes argue I'd rather see your grocery budget much higher than your eating out bill, but that's, just a conversation of making your own food at home. But I understand physicians are busy, but that tracking mechanism, and again, another shout out to having a financial advisor. Ideally, they can walk through these things with you. Monarch's really cool because if you have Monarch, you can actually share those reports with your financial advisor. So kind of neat stuff in there, but and I don't know if this is exactly how they described it, but that dangerously high income where it's just enough that you don't nitpick it, but not enough that you can't not care. Like you still have to care, but having some form of mechanism in place to track your cash flow is so important. The amount of individuals that don't even understand how their pay stub works. Like when we walk through, we're like, hey, here's your federal taxes, your state taxes, your local taxes, here's your FICA taxes. Like how many times have you met with a client like, why do I always get this pay increase at the end of the year? I'm like, it's not a pay increase. You're not paying your FICA taxes anymore. You've maxed out on Social Security. And they're like, oh, that's what that is. And you're like, well, we can actually plan for it because remember, you were already not used to having that money. So why don't, at the end of the year, whether you're maybe building up some cash for the holidays, or maybe that's the time of year where you actually start to build up the fund to do your backdoor Roth for the next year. There's a lot of unique things that you can do by just understanding money coming in, money going out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff.
All right. Step 3, set your savings rate now. Your first big pay raise, the easiest time to start saving. I suggest you aim for 20 to 30% of your gross income. Yes, that's aggressive, but you're starting late compared to most high earners. And compound growth is your best friend. Every dollar you automate equals less guilt later. I actually love your aggressive number. What's your context behind this one, Tyler?
It's the boundary. Like it's an important boundary to be setting. So, because it's not just about, well, what am I currently spending, but how can I protect future spending? Because what I'm trying to get to here is helping everyone to realize that saving is advocating for future spending. You want to spend later when you're tired and old? Save. And this is how you do it. You have to, and savings rate it's complicated because sometimes people can't save the same percentage as someone else, which I understand. So if you're looking at your own situation, you're like, I can't do 20 to 30%. That's okay. We have to start with some rules of thumb here, and that's where this is coming from. But you need to, after you've accomplished step 2, and you know your number, you know your cash flow, you need to then identify what is reasonable for you to save. And then you need to carve that out and protect it and automate it so that it happens without your management, because you will not do it if you have to manage it. So that's where I'm coming from. You got to find your number. If you have the latitude to save more, then and it's a priority to be able to get to a point of financial independence, recreational employment. That's my version of FIRE. Then do it, but you got to set that, and then you got to do the transfer, whether it's 401k contribution, cash balance plan, Roth IRA, taxable account. But that's where I was coming from. What do you think?
Yeah, I love that. I always have said, 20% is probably the absolute minimum for a lot of physicians just because of that late start. The higher that number goes, I think it also goes to what you said before too, on like, hey, if you're cool with working till 65 or 70, which most physicians are not super pumped for that, maybe it can be a 20%. Maybe it can even be a little bit lower and you're more like traditional retirement. But, working with physicians for 15 years, as you have as well, like most of them would at least be financially independent to make some decisions well before that. Maybe it's not, fully retirement. I would say physicians are usually type A, very driven people. So, sitting on a beach with a pina colada for 30 years, 40 years is usually not in their brain because they got to keep doing something. But having the flexibility to go from a 1.2 FTE to a 0.8 or a 0.6 can be not only from a work-life balance, amazing, but also continue to give you longevity in the work path, right? Like if you only had to work, 3 days instead of 5 days per week, you probably are like, what, I could probably do this a little bit longer. So it also adds some career duration, in my opinion, when you add in that flexibility. And if you're, high income household as a physician, 20 to 30% of your income, you likely are well past maxing out the 403B, maybe a 457B. Backdoor Roth is completely, filled up to the brim. So you're definitely get into a taxable account at this point too, which I love that. I always call the taxable account like utility player. So whether you need it for something near term, whether it kind of bridges the gap between early financial independence and retirement, but it just adds in a huge new layer to your financial plan that it's not all geared for retirement per se. So I love those numbers. To your point on if you're seeing this and you're like 20%, like that's crazy. Earlier in your career, if you're still balancing, certain things, maybe you can't get there, but the sooner that you can set up and automate 10%, 15%, and then as life starts to kind of get a little bit more organized for you, like you said in that tweet there, like even with a pay increase, okay, then donate most of that towards your higher contributions. But I think that's a great number, 20 to 30%, especially in the physician community. And if you're quadruple board certified and did fellowship for 6 years and you're getting at this at 40 and you want to retire at 55, clearly those numbers are going to go up. But for a lot of you, that is a good target. And if you can hit that, you have some bragging rights in the hospital cafeteria too, because unfortunately, many are probably not hitting those numbers.
Yep. Yeah. All right. And then step 4, right?
Step 4, build your cash moat, AKA the emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of expenses in a high yield savings account. This is not for investing. It's for sleeping at night when life punches you. Well said.
Yeah. I think this one I wrote because I've seen an uptick as the stock market continues to grow and go up, and like even in the crypto space, their approach toward dollars and the value of keeping cash. There's reasons that people will write in their blogs or in their tweets or wherever, where they're saying that you need to put your money to work. And this to me is so important to manage behavior because regular people, which is when you read about stuff like this where people are like, oh yeah, invest everything. You don't need cash, just use a credit card in case there's like an emergency. And I don't know, they come up with all sorts of ideas. That's not regular life people. That's someone that's just trying to get your attention with an exciting idea that might sound ridiculous. And so then they're like, oh, they're going to read my posts. That's definitely a motivation there. For regular people, we benefit from knowing that we have a backstop in case something unexpected happens. And yes, a lot of emergency expenses, they can be paid with a credit card. So it's not like you have to have the cash ready. You could have it in a separate high yield account, but having it there to be able to pay the credit card bill once the expense has been charged or whatever it is, it's so critical for maintaining good investor behavior. If you have that cash position there, you're going to be thinking significantly less about what the stock market is doing. And if you're like, well, if something bad happens, where's my money at? How much is it worth? The cash helps to alleviate that dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, we're a little bit more, I think I've noticed on one of our past episodes, we're even a little bit more aggressive than you. You use the term expenses. We actually like the idea of income, almost income after taxes. So almost a little bit more aggressive on that number, especially the earlier you are in your career, where like there could be a pivot in terms of like you might lose your job, or maybe you want to leave the practice and go somewhere else, and you go, months without income. So we're even a little bit more aggressive on that. And then on top of that, we call it level 2 emergency fund. And this is like our introduction to a brokerage account, where we'll say, hey, we don't want to have too much in cash because, yes, rates are still much better than the brick and mortar bank, but there might be better options out there. And we'll kind of use this as our intro to a brokerage account. We call it our level 2 emergency fund, where we usually take a much more moderate allocation. Maybe it's 60% stocks, 40% bonds, maybe it's 50-50. If clients seem very risk averse, or maybe it's their first like dipping their toe into the markets outside of the retirement accounts, maybe we'll even use a little bit less. But the idea is, hey, we're trying to get a little bit better return. We're clearly going to have more volatility because we are into the stock market. But you hit your emergency fund number of 25,000, 50,000, 100,000, whatever your magical number is, your sleep number, as I like to call it. And then we start to put into this level 2 emergency fund, which is usually in the form of a brokerage account. And then even on that account, there's a point where like we also don't want to have $1 million in a 30% bonds, 70% stock portfolio, or excuse me, opposite way around, 70% bonds, 30% stocks, because at some point there, we're also going to miss out on opportunity cost of the longer term. So we'll even put a cap on that level too. But you said it beautifully in terms of things are going to happen, whether it's, the normal, like the AC goes out, the hot water heater goes out. Like, of course, those things are going to happen too. But we're always thinking of like, what about the bigger things? We one of our clients, she's a dentist. She's doing a water slide with her kids, and she got kicked in the head, and very bad concussion, very small brain bleed, but something you think you just recover from. She's been out for a few months now. And it's like those weird things, like, again, family vacation, you wouldn't expect anything like that, but weird things happen. This is also why we talk about disability insurance, which we'll get to, and things of that nature. But that's where the emergency fund is so important, because again, it just keeps you agile. Things are going to happen, whether, we'd like to admit it or not, but there will be shocks to the financial plan. And the more buckets you have set up to kind of safeguard that and, to build your cash moat, you're not going to be upset about it in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah. Good call.
Anything else to add on steps 1 through 4?
Only that they are intentionally chronological, or should be. So recognize the emotional component of money decisions and how it can hurt you if you don't plan. And so then we move on to step 2, which is the beginning of planning, knowing your cash flow numbers. That helps you then to identify what a reasonable savings rate, what your reasonable savings rate capability is in step 3. And then an offshoot of that is step 4, which is, aside from the savings rate, or I should say, a portion of the savings rate directs toward that emergency fund to fill that bucket up. And then it can be redirected toward other mid and long-term goals. So it's organized, and it'll benefit you if you approach this in this organized fashion.
Well said. Next week will be our January 1st, 2026 episode. Where does time go? But no better way to start off your new year than with steps 5 through 8. So next week, we will build on today's topic in our 3-part miniseries. We'll go steps 5 through 8. And then the following week, we will hit steps 9 through 12. Tyler, it is an absolute honor to be back in the studio with you, my friend. I will catch you on the next episode.
Sounds great, man. Good to see you.
See you in a bit.
This information is for general purposes only. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific professional, financial, or tax advice, as individual concerns vary. Please see a financial professional, CPA, and/or an attorney in regards to your own individual situation. Wealth Deals Advisory Services and Financial Planning offered through Vicus Capital Inc., a federally registered investment advisor. Olson Consulting LLC, offering advisory services and financial planning, is a state registered investment advisor.